Very good afternoon, Prynawn da, to our members and also those who have joined us from other sectors, Pan Wales. I am Rob O'Neill, the CEO at the Welsh Automotive Forum, and I'm delighted to welcome today the Institute of Export and International Trade to deliver this specific and bespoke webinar. We wrote to our members on the 17th of May highlighting that whilst EU imports had a period of easement initially until July the 1st this year, which was subsequently extended until the 1st of January next year for standard non-controlled goods, there is still the requirement to make import declarations 175 days from the date of import, commencing the 1st of January this year. So this rolling 175-day deadline for supplementary declarations for imports effectively starts from the 25th of June. And the supplementary declaration is a legal requirement. And if it isn't completed before the respective deadline date of each shipment, and that's, for example, the 26th of June for an import dated the 2nd of January, the 27th of June for an import dated the 3rd of January, then your organisation could potentially be fined up to £2,500 for each missing declaration if identified by a HMRC audit. So it really is imperative that manufacturers, freight organisations, customs brokers clearly understand their respective obligations in view of this particular deadline, especially as our intel suggests that some smaller operations decided not to make the customs declaration at the point of entry into the UK following the trade cooperation agreement with the European Union, which came into effect, as we said, on the 1st of January 2021. This webinar itself is going to provide further guidance on supplementary declaration submission deadlines following the easement in the UK border operating model. And we're going to hear this afternoon from our experts, and we have the pleasure of listening to Vicky Payne and William Barnes-Graham, who will discuss in more detail the topic of supplementary declarations and the potential risks in the event of non-compliance. And Vicky has a wealth of experience over 20 years in customs, international trade and supply chain. And William is a senior content editor and is going to facilitate today's webinar. Following the presentation, there will be a Q&A session, and I actively encourage you to participate and register your specific questions, which Vicky will do her very best to answer this afternoon. So for me, it's to say, enjoy this informative session, ensure that you are prepared for this pending deadline. So with nothing else further to do, Vicky and William, the virtual stage is all yours.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for the introduction, and great to be partnering with the Welsh Automotive Forum on today's webinar. We hope everyone attending today or listening at a later date will find this session really useful. If we go to the next slide, as Rob has mentioned, Vicky is the real star of today's event and will be presenting shortly, while I will be chairing the Q&A later on and running a few polls, starting with a poll we're going to have in a second. But first of all, as you can see, Vicky has a lot of experience in customs and supply chain operations, as Rob mentioned, and leads on the educational programs for both the Institute of Export and International Trade and also the HMRC-backed UK Customs Academy, which the Institute is involved in as well. But we move on to our next slide. I'm just going to do a few polls today, starting with this one. So the first poll is, have you delayed declarations for goods moving into GB from the EU? The options there are yes for all shipments, yes for only certain products, not sure, no, need to know further information, or no, not suitable for our business. So please do feel free to answer the polls on the screen there. While you are answering that poll, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Firstly, you can contact me with any comments or questions using the control panel to the right-hand side of your screen. We hope to get to a number of your questions towards the end of the webinar in particular. A couple of tips though, keep the questions short, keep them practical, and keep them relevant to the broader audience. one of the things we unfortunately can't do is do too much navel gazing into kind of what's going to happen next with various negotiations around Brexit, but we can answer your questions around what the rules are at the moment and their implications. If you feel as though your question has not been answered, please do review the Institute's technical helpline, training and consultancy offerings, which we will be talking about later in the webinar. Secondly, you will receive access to today's slide pack and a recording of the webinar in a follow-up email, so please do try to listen in as carefully as you can to today's presentation. For now, though, just going to close that poll and share the results. So 7% of you have declared shipments for all your shipments and a further 7% for only certain products. 20% have said no, you need to know further information. 40% of you have said it's not suitable for your business. 27% of you are not sure. So thank you everyone for answering that poll. But for now though, it's my pleasure to hand over to Vicky, our Customs and Trade Specialist for today, to present to you about the border operating model for imports into Great Britain from the EU. Vicky, any thoughts on that poll before you begin?
Yeah, it's very varied. It sounds a bit, again, like people are a bit confused by it. So I'm hoping today we'll clear that up. Yeah, it's very low numbers on the yes, I thought, from my opinion. But again, if people don't understand, then they'll be doing full declarations at the very beginning, just to be on the safe side. So everyone who's not sure, hopefully I'll answer some of your questions today around it.
Great, thanks, Vicky. Well, over to you for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you, Will, for the introduction. So today we're going to be going over a bit around the border operating model, just a bit of brief understanding around that, and also what's needed for a declaration. And also we'll go into the risks around if you don't actually provide the declaration on time. So traders who chose to defer declarations for non-controlled goods will need to complete supplementary declarations as early as June 2021. So we've tried to get this webinar in quite early. Yes, it's near the end of June already, but it'll still give you time to do your declarations if needed. The border operating model stipulates that declarations for goods brought to GB from the EU need to be made within 175 days following arrival of the goods into the UK. So again, people may have been bringing goods in on the deferred declaration since January. So now's the time to start gathering that data and inputting those supplementary declarations if you haven't already done so. And also today we'll be looking at traders and at what traders and brokers need to do to complete the declarations. So relevant fields and relevant information you'll need around that. So the first slide we'll go into is what are supplementary declarations. So what's changed? So the UK left the EU Single Market and Customs Union on the 31st January 2020. We entered into a transition period through till the 31st of December 2020. But as of the 1st of January 21, all goods movements between GB and 27 EU countries are considered exports and imports now. They're not available for free movement anymore. So customs procedures and formalities now apply as they would with rest of world goods. And dispatches now become exports and arrivals become imports. And the UK is now formally a third country from a EU's perspective. So again, we're just treated as a rest of world country now. Imports and exports are required and full declarations are needed. And the EU law no longer applies. So the border operating model. So what is the border operating model? So it became effective on the 1st of January 2021. But the border operating model was actually released in July 2020. And there's been further updates to it as well since then. But it defines the obligations that businesses must comply with when moving goods through the UK customs border from the EU. And it also gives a staged approach for introducing import controls. This does not relate to Northern Ireland, as that's covered under the Northern Ireland Protocol. So just want to make that clear that the border operating model doesn't cover Northern Ireland. But the border operating model basically sets out changes and new obligations that businesses must comply with in order to import and export goods. So there's some simplifications, such as postponed VAT accounting, removal of the customs comprehensive guarantee, easier access to customs special procedures, such as inward processing and customs warehousing. And it presents opportunities for businesses operating in the UK to utilise VAT and duty simplifications before moving goods into the EU. So again, the border operating model, released in July 2020, provides a staged approach to importing into the UK. So that's what we're going to be going through a little bit today as well. It gives him further information around controlled goods and special procedures and duty deferments, AEO, and postponed VAT accounting. So as I said, there's been further updates to the BOM, and more detail has been given on government systems, new physical infrastructure such as transit offices, EIDR, information on groupage loads, transit and GVMS. So the border operating model does contain a lot of information in there, and I would recommend that you refer to it if you haven't already done so. So available GB import processes. So as at today, businesses can bring goods into GB from the EU using full frontier declarations. So full customs entries to be made to HMRC, including all the details and payment of any duties owed, whether that's via a deferment account or another method of payment. These can take time to complete due to you need all the detailed information about the goods when the goods arrive at the port. And data is needed in advance of the goods arriving, so you need that communication with your supplier to ensure that you have all the relevant information to be able to create a full frontier declaration at the port. The other available process is Customs Freight Simplified Procedures, so CFSP. And it's a way of providing minimal data. So there's only certain fields that are required when presenting to CFSP, so you don't need all the front information. And there's two options. So you've got Simplified Declaration Procedure, or SDP, and Entry into Declarants Records, EIDR. And this is used for delaying the full declaration. So you make the minimum amount of data to get the goods through, but then you will still need to do your declaration. And that's what we're going to be going on to a little bit later on. But it just supports the supply chain and the flow of goods through the border. So what are delayed declarations? So the UK government allows traders to delay declarations for goods moving into Great Britain from the EU. And traders can delay declarations for goods which move into GB until the end of December 2021 for 175 days. So we'll go through a timeline in a little while as well, so we can actually visually see the plan for this 175 rolling days. So from January 2022, normal declaration timelines apply. So anything that's brought in after the 1st of January 2022 or on and after the 1st, you will need to do normal declarations, full frontier declarations for those goods. So declarations can only be delayed for non-controlled goods. So again, later on, we'll be going into more detail around commodity codes and identifying if you are actually moving controlled goods. But it's good you need to understand your product to make sure that you're delaying declarations for the correct product also. And traders can make an import declaration without authorization at this stage as well. So supplementary declarations. Entry into Declarants Records, EIDR, or Simplified Frontier Declaration, are always followed up by a supplementary declaration. Sorry, I said supplementary twice then, apologies. It's a legal requirement to complete this on time, and it controls all the accounts for duty and import VAT if applicable. So you need all your records up to date. Make sure you've got all the details of all the movements that are coming into the UK, and make sure you record any import VAT and duty if it's applicable for your goods. So you should include detailed information about the goods imported, such as your commodity code, your weight, your value, your origin, as a standard declaration would be if you're bringing goods in from the rest of the world. If there's any companies that haven't dealt with imports before, we will be going through the standard requirements such as commodity codes and valuation. But I would recommend, if you're unsure about how to do declarations, to look into the actual fields that are required as well on the full declaration before you submit them, so you make sure that you're compliant with the requirements. So who should complete supplementary declarations? So traders can use an intermediary to make an entry into their records, followed by the supplementary declaration. They can make an entry into their own records and use an intermediary to make the supplementary declaration. Or they can make both the entry into the records and the supplementary declaration themselves. So there's different options that you can use. If you're not sure how to do it or haven't got the systems in place or processes in place, you can use an intermediary to do this on your behalf. Option 3, so making both the entry into the records and supplementary declarations yourself, you will have to have an authorization to use CFSP, have a chief badge or access to CDS to make the declaration into the custom system, and also a duty management software to interface with HMRC systems. So if this is an option for you to do this, given the timeline at the moment, it may be a case that you need to use an intermediary in the meantime. But again, it depends on your long-term plans as a business if you want to make declarations for your business to get all this information in place, ready for you to do your own declarations. So what are controlled goods? Declarations cannot be delayed for controlled goods. Normal import declarations must be made if goods are controlled. So again, you need to understand your product to see if there's any controlled goods within the shipments that you're bringing into the UK. There's a full list on the gov.uk website, but some examples could be excise goods, controlled goods, toxic chemicals, firearms, military goods, and I've also put in there, consider things like oils, petrol, lubricants for vehicle manufacture. So there may be things that you may not necessarily think they're controlled, but they may have some regulations around those products that you're bringing in. So please be aware of those items as well when you're looking at the commodities that you're actually importing into the UK. If you do have any control goods, you'll have to make a full declaration on that. So the timelines for the delayed declaration. So just some examples here. So we have goods arrived in GB on the 1st of January 2021. The supplementary declaration will be due on the 25th of June 2021. If you bring goods in and they arrived in GB on the 15th of February, again, the supplementary declaration will be due on the 9th of August 2021, so it's a rolling 6 months. If goods arrive on the 6th of December 21, you can still declare those goods as a supplementary declaration, but it will be due on the 30th of May 2022. So from January 22, declarations cannot be delayed for goods entering Great Britain. So it's at the time the goods arrived. So that's important to understand that you can still bring goods in throughout the year and declare them next year, but anything arriving from January 22, you can't do a delayed declaration for those goods. They will need to have a declaration at the time. So moving goods and delaying declarations. So just a bit of a visual again. So goods depart on the 1st of February. The product's manufactured by a company in Poland and shipped to Great Britain. The goods arrive at the UK border on the 5th of February. The trader makes an entry into their records at the point of entry, including the CPC code, the unique consignment number, the commodity code, the date and time of entry, and that's all they'll need to make it into their entry into their records. So it's not a full declaration. They don't need to do that at this point. So the CPC code is actually the customs procedure code, which tells customs the method that you're bringing the goods into, whether that's free circulation or a special procedure. So the goods arrive at the buyer's premises on the 5th of February. So they arrive in Great Britain, the trader holds accurate receipt records. So again, make sure you keep records of all the goods that you've received in, all the information around those goods as well. So you can actually tie the records up to see what's been imported. And then the supplementary declaration will be due 175 days later. So you can see there the flow of an import. And again, the date will move dependent on the date that you're bringing the goods into the UK. So back over to Will for a quick poll.
Thanks, Vicky. That last slide was last couple of slides really interesting, and yeah, really good to visualize it as well. So, I mean, our next poll follows on quite nicely from what Vicky's just been mentioning. We are asking, were you aware of the 175-day timeframe for completing supplementary declarations? Options being yes, no, not sure. And just while people are answering that poll, we've had a couple of questions in, Vicky. First one in is from Ian, who's asked, do you suggest that we start making declarations now?
Okay, so again, this is down to how the business wants to do their declarations. But again, you have up to 175 days. You don't have to wait till that last day to put those declarations in. So just be aware of that. It's not that you have to use the 6 months. You could use a month and do your declaration then. So if it's going to take you time to gather the data, I'd start that now, just to make sure that you can make sure you've got all the information needed to do your declaration. If there's any problems or any gaps in the information, you can go out and find that information. I'd recommend that you wouldn't leave it right till the last day to do your declaration. So give yourself time.
Give yourself time and get ahead of the game is always
Yeah.
good advice. And the question in from Mary, who's asked, if traders are using freight couriers such as UPS, FedEx, DHL to carry out imports, exports, or make customs declarations on their behalf, then who is responsible for making the full declaration and providing the supplementary declaration?
So in regards to couriers, they usually use their CFSP and do the declaration. So the fast parcel operators, it's dependent on your contract with them on how they're doing that. Are they bringing that into their own CFSP on your behalf and delaying the declaration, or are they actually doing a full frontier declaration at the port? It's difficult to answer that without knowing the situation, unfortunately, with that business. But again, it goes back to the slide of if you're using an intermediary to do your declarations, then you'll need to provide that all the information to them to enable them to do so. So if they may need your part numbers, your commodity code, your values, etc., to do the declaration. So get in touch with them if they've not been doing your declarations for you, or if you haven't been receiving your entries, and find out what situation your goods are in, what information you need to provide, so you can start gathering that now.
Thanks, Vicky. I hope that's been helpful, Mary. So just going to close that poll now. Share the results. So really interesting. 56% of you hadn't or weren't aware of the 6-month time frame, and a further 6% of you weren't sure. So only 38% of you were aware, really highlighting the importance of webinars such as this. Any surprises there, Vicky? Is that about what you expected?
I am surprised, if I'm honest, but I think that's more the fact that because we've been looking at the border operating model for training purposes, I didn't realise how much businesses weren't aware of the border operating model and the insights in there. So it is surprising, but again, going back to the initial poll result, that not a lot of people are actually using delayed declarations, or they don't know. I'd start asking around in the business. If you're not sure if you're using delayed declarations and you're not aware of this 175 days, I'd definitely start asking the questions with the import teams or customs teams if you have them in place. If not, ask your intermediaries, how are they bringing the goods in for you, and start asking those questions now.
It's really interesting. I mean, obviously, we're very close to it, the IOE, so we've been very close to doing training and webinars on this very topic. But if you look at the media reporting of Brexit so far this year, it really hasn't focused on these sorts of issues. It's been much more focused around the Northern Ireland Protocol and the issues exports have been facing out of the UK, but not much media attention on this. So yeah, please do. I hope today's webinar is useful, but please do review some of the content the Institute's been looking at as well for more information. But on that note, back over to you, Vicky.
Thank you. No, it's very useful if when people do fill in the polls, just get an idea of how businesses are dealing with things. So thank you very much for that. So we'll go on to the next item, which is your import preparation steps. So again, if you've not dealt with imports before, there's certain steps that you need to take. If you do rest of world imports, then the information that you need will be the same. But again, if you're delaying the declarations, you may have to dig around for this information from your suppliers and out of your systems. So check the process to follow and agreed Incoterms. So prior to the goods moving, you should have already agreed the Incoterms to see who's actually responsible for doing the declarations in the UK. Obtain an EIDR number. So hopefully most people on the call will already have an EIDR number. If not, you will need to apply for one. So it's the Economic Operator Registration Identification Number to be able to do declarations. Ensure that you have accurate records. Make sure everything, all your imports, well, ins and outs, the warehouse, all the purchase orders, transport records. Ensure that you keep copies of those or be able to get a copy of them when you're linking all the documents together. And then, how will I make customs declarations? So this is the decision you need to make now. If you're going to use an intermediary, you're going to do it yourself. It's that discussion now that if you haven't already done so, you need to start having that discussion now. So the next stage, if you haven't done so already, you need to classify the goods. So you need to give them a HS commodity code. Again, there's a little bit more information on that further down the slides. Also, you need to identify the value of the goods and ensure that other data is available. So things like country of origin, weights, ship from, ship to, all the contract details for the purchase orders, so the sold from details, sold to, and any additional information we've got involved with those parts, so full descriptions, commodity codes, etc. That'll all be needed to be able to do the declaration. So we'll just go on to the UK tariff. So each commodity code has preferential duty rates attached for goods moving from the EU to UK if they are of EU preferential status. The commodity code will determine the duty rate applicable to the product when it's imported. So if it doesn't meet preferential status, you'll get a standard duty rate against that product, and the commodity code will identify what the duty rate is. It's also used to determine the internal import duty rates, the rules of origin, and any trade protection measures. Also, it'll identify if there's any licensed goods and any sanctions and export controls. So the tariff code, that's how it works. It identifies all these areas, but you need to identify that for the product that you're actually declaring. If you're making the declaration in the UK in your name, if you're the importer of record, you're responsible to get that information right. So if you're using somebody else's suggested commodity code, that may be incorrect. You may be paying the wrong duties, either underpaying or overpaying. So always understand the commodity codes and your products. It also goes towards statistics for HMRC as well. So the UK Global Tariff is the tariff that we use now for commodity codes. So this was effective from the 1st January 2021. So it introduced simplified, reduced and liberalised tariffs. And the UK Global Tariff applies on import unless there's a free trade agreement. Any exceptions apply to the goods, so certain products. And if goods are coming from developing countries covered by the UK Generalised Scheme of Preferences, so the GSP scheme. So again, there's a standard tariff rate for all goods, and that will apply to your products unless you can apply preferential treatment or there's an exception to the rule on your products. So payment of duty and VAT. Duty payment is payable when the import declaration is submitted, either via a full frontier declaration at the port or supplementary declaration. So you can use a duty deferment account, which defers a payment of the duty and VAT till the 15th of the following month. And most companies can apply for a guarantee waiver also. So these are options on how to pay your duty or how to defer the payment till the following month. So if that's the way you want to do that and you haven't got a duty deferment account in place, again, I'd start looking into that now. We also have postponed VAT accounting. So VAT will be declared and recovered on the same VAT return rather than having to pay it up front and recover it later. So the goods are released without payment of import VAT, and this can improve your cash flow for your business. So again, it's worth asking if we are actually using the postponed VAT accounting, or if it may be a benefit to your business to do so. So we'll go on now to preferential rates of duty. So claiming preferential rates of duty if declarations were delayed. So the UK and EU have signed a free trade agreement called the Trade Cooperation Agreement. So goods must meet the rules of origin to qualify. So just because they're arriving from the EU does not necessarily mean that you can put a preferential status against those goods. They need to meet the rules of origin. Goods must have EU originating status to qualify for the preferential rate of duty. The importer must have proof of origin or importer's knowledge that goods are originating. And the claim made on the full frontier or supplementary declaration for preference, you'll need to ensure that that's made when you're actually doing your declaration. And the claim can be made on chief or CDS. So again, if you're unsure, if you need further information from the supplier around the parts, or if you're not sure if they do meet preferential status, but you're actually applying that to your product, then again, get the information, ensure that you understand the rules of origin for your product, speak to your supplier, make sure any statements and declarations that they're providing to you are correct. And again, keep all your records to provide to HMRC if there's any queries around the preferential rate of duty that you're using. So key data requirements. So country of origin, you need that country of origin on the declaration to make sure again that you're getting the information from the supplier and it's as accurate as you believe it to be. If they're signing a declaration to say that the goods are of certain origin, then that is the declaration. They've signed that to state that. The commodity code. So the supplier can provide you the commodity code as stated earlier, but use it as a guide. Don't use that as gospel. Always check that your product has the correct commodity code when you're making the declaration. As I said, if you're the importer of record of the goods, you'll be held responsible for the information that's provided on that declaration. The weight of the goods, customs value, and customs procedure code. So again, all this information is going to be required when you submitting your declaration. So if you're not sure of any of these items, you need to go and find that information up front. So the commodity code, it's actually made up of 8, 10 or 14 digits. So it starts with a HS code at the 6-digit level. Then it moves on to the combined nomenclature, which is the 8-digit code used for exporting goods out of the country. For imports, you need a 10-digit code. So again, if you're being supplied with a commodity code from the supplier, usually they'll only put it up to 8 digits on their invoice anyway. So you will need the 10-digit code to import the product into the UK. But there's also additional measures. So it can go up to 14-digit code used for importing products which have additional measures, such as excise and anti-dumping duties applied to them. So just be aware, again, looking at your commodity codes, make sure your product's correct, and also make sure if there's any requirements around the product, which I've got an example next. So I'll show you this. So just a brief example, when you're looking at fuels and petroleum oils, you can see on the UK Global Tariff, it will show you the top piece, which is in grey. If you've never used it before, that will come up at the top once you've selected your code. And then underneath that, a bit further down the screen, it'll actually show you some additional notes and additional codes. So always look down at the additional notes, comments, etc. at the bottom of the page, but also look against the country that you're exporting to or importing from. and this will give you additional excise information in this instance. So it's saying that these are actually excise goods and you need additional codes to be able to bring those goods in. And there'll be excise charges against those goods as well as your duty rate. So again, it's just an example, just to make sure you're aware. If you need to know and understand commodity codes and you're not sure, we do have courses that can take you through that to understand the tariff. But again, it's just making you aware for in this instance, when you're making your declarations, make sure you understand what product that you're actually declaring. So valuation, there's different methods to value goods. So method one is a transaction value. So this is actually on notice 252 of the government website, and it will take you through in depth what each method means and what you can apply it to in regards to your product. So method two, if you can't value your goods using the transaction value under method one, you move on to method two, which is identical goods. So can you value your goods based on an identical product? Method three is similar goods. So again, if you can't use method one and you can't use method two, you move on to method three. So I identify any similar goods. And again, on notice 252, it will tell you what you can and can't do around that in regards to the regulations. But if you can't use the first three methods, you can use method four, which is the selling price in the UK. Method five, cost of producing the goods. And method six, which is, apologies, the fallback method. So again, it will give you further information, but you need to understand how to value your goods to make sure you're putting the correct valuation on your declaration. So delivery costs, commissions, royalties, tools used in production, containers, packaging should be included even if it's paid separately. So please refer to the notice because it will have the full list of charges to be included and excluded for certain products. The responsibility again falls to the importer to declare the customs value correctly. So such as with the COM codes or commodity codes and the origin, the valuation of the goods as well, you need to declare the correct value on the goods, as you can be held account for that as well. So method one should be considered first, and if it's not appropriate, move to method two and so on. So you're working down the methods to identify the value for your product. And also any free of charge items should also have a customs value. So even if you're being sent samples or something's damaged or it's just a gift from another company and there's no actual sale between you, commercial sale, anything that's free of charge, you can't just put a zero against that. It'll still need to have a commercial value for customs purposes. So the Customs Procedure Code, or CPC, it's needed on all customs declarations. It identifies customs and or excise regimes that goods are being entered into and removed from, and it determines whether duty is paid or suspended on import. So the common CPC code used is imported into free circulation, which is 40 and all the zeros. There are different codes. So again, familiarise yourself with the Customs Procedure Code. Ensure that if you are using an intermediary, you're telling them what code to use for your product. Again, it can identify whether goods are being brought in under free circulation, so duties to be paid, or if it's in a special procedure, or if they're return goods, for example. So there's an array of different codes that you can apply to your product. Just please be aware that you need to understand which code it applies or which you want to apply to your product when you're doing your declaration. So I think it's back over to Will now for another poll.
Yes, we'll do another quick poll. We'll do this one a bit quicker. So this poll is asking, do you provide written instructions to your customs broker? The options there are yes for all imports, yes standing instruction, not sure, or no, our broker handles everything themselves. Vicky, while people are answering that question, just one question from our users. So we have Patrick, who's asked, our suppliers in Europe use DAP Incoterms, so they sort out all the paperwork, customs documentation, and so on, and in some cases charge for this. Do we still need to make the declarations though?
Yeah, so under DAP terms, it's delivered at place. So your supplier will be doing the transport up to your door, but you're still liable for the import declaration in that instance. So I'd go back to the Incoterm and just understand that that's what's been agreed, and make sure it's not under DDP, which is delivered duty paid, so they'd be responsible for the import declaration. Because if they're doing shipments under DAP and you've not been notified, the intermediary or the broker or custom freight forwarder, as an example, might actually be putting that under their CFSP authorization. So you need to know what goods have been moved and how they've actually been declaring those in the UK. So again, have those conversations now, find out who's actually been doing the declaration, if there's been a full declaration done or if there's been entry into Declarants Records. You need to understand that at this point.
Thanks, Vicky. Hope that's been useful, Patrick. I'm going to close that poll now to show the results. So over half of you do provide written instructions to your brokers. So that's 55% for all imports, 9% with a standing instruction, 27% of you aren't sure, while 9% of you said your broker handles everything themselves. But conscious of time, so I'm going to hand back to you, Vicky.
Thank you. Yeah, going back to everything that we've just gone over as well in regards to com codes and everything, if you're doing the declarations in your name, remember you're responsible for that information going on there. So if you have got a written instruction to your broker, that's the safest way to do it, because you've actually instructed them on how to import goods on your behalf. So documentation and housekeeping. So the best practice is for the importer and exporter to ensure all paperwork is kept on file for upwards of 4 years. Usually it's 7 years. I know most businesses, I think, keep it for around 8 years, but your import and export paperwork can also affect the VAT aspect for proof of export and things like that. So ensure that you know how long you should be keeping records for, especially for things like certificates for goods as well. But again, it's usually minimum of 4 years, but see if it has an impact on any other departments within your business. So it's extremely important that traders retain an audit trail in case of a customs audit. And a good way of managing this, or actually auditing it, is through the management support system from HMRC, which is MSS data. So they can actually report to you any shipments that have been allocated under your EORI number. So you can do that cross-reference of what you're expecting and what you need to do declarations, or what declarations you've done against what you've received. So again, traders should retain commercial invoice, packing list, origin certificates, transport documents, any regulatory certificates, copies of customs declarations, and any interest submissions if required. So ensure that you've got a robust audit system or filing retaining system. Most of these documents are electronic now as well, so make sure you can actually retrieve the documents as well in case of customs audit, or you need it as evidence of import or export. So checks and errors. A trader should check the accuracy of declarations and remediate the errors. Businesses should correct errors and implement remedial action to prevent further occurrences. So it's down to you to check that the declaration has been done correctly. So this comes back to actually instructing your intermediary, if you have someone doing your brokerage for you. So you know what goods are coming in from the supplier's invoice. You know what goods need to be cleared from your instruction to the broker, and then you know how they've done it by the entry that they've actually made into customs. So the three-way check there, you can ensure then that they've done it as you would want them to and as you instruct them to. But again, it'd be down to you to identify those errors and actually request an amendment if needed. So if there is a error made, there's a C285 form or a C2001 form for duties that are overpaid or underpaid. So make sure you identify this as soon as possible to HMRC once it's been found, and also put actions into place in the business to make sure it doesn't happen again. So last slide for me, but the best one. So there are 2 types of customs civil penalty action. So you can get a warning letter if you haven't done your declarations correctly or haven't done them at all. and a financial penalty. So the maximum penalty provided in law is £2,500 per contravention, and that's for the more significant irregularities, but it's also £1,000 for other irregularities. But the minimum penalty is £250, but it's usually on the first contravention, but it depends on the seriousness. So just because they state that it could be £250 for the first instance, it depends on what's actually happened, what have you declared or under declared. If you've not made a declaration as well, obviously HMRC may look at that as smuggling goods. So just be aware that this is in law, these are the penalties, and it's per contravention, so it's per instance that it's happened as well. So if you refer to notice 301, it'll actually tell you the civil penalties for contraventions of customs law. So you may be, if you know your business needs to implement something, you can go to that notice then to back up any case that you have for your business to make sure that they are being compliant with HMRC. So we've got some useful links and further information, which I believe will be sent out to you as well. So this will go through the border operating model, delaying declarations, how to bring goods in and moving goods, also preferential rates of duty, and also around notice 252 for the valuation, international trade paperwork, and any controlled goods for your information there. So it's back over to Will. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Bang on time as well. I think we've got about 10 minutes for questions, so that's great to see. Well done. But yeah, I hope everyone has found that really useful. Some great advice there, and again some good visualizations as well, which hopefully drums home how important this issue is for UK traders. Just on this slide, just to flag some of the support that the Institute is providing to its members during this period of great change for UK trade. If you do join with us, there's various things you can get, including answers to your queries for our technical helpline, opportunities to learn some of the processes and practicalities of trade, which Vicky's been talking about today, through discounts on our one-day training courses, and chances to continually update and maintain your knowledge through our member-only lunchtime learning webinars, discounts on bespoke consultancy services to get the hands-on support you need for your business needs, and all sorts more. There's absolutely loads that we're doing to help companies at the moment. So for more information about all of that, please do visit the site at export.org.uk. If we move on to the next slide, we're going to do one last poll before we go into a few more questions. So this poll is asking, do you have clear terms with any broker you may hire to complete declarations over who would cover the penalties for non-compliance? So that is, do you understand, or do you and your broker understand what happens in a situation of non-compliance, who would cover those fines or penalties? Just while you are answering that question, I will start the Q&A. Do remember that you can ask questions using the control panel to the right-hand side of your screen. Vicky, a few questions already coming through. This one is from Roger, who's asked, what happens if you do not do the declarations on time? So I just want to recap, what happens if you don't do things correctly?
Yeah, so it goes back to the non-compliance aspect. So it refers back to that last slide really that I showed you. If you're bringing goods in and you're not declaring them on time, then HMRC are in their right to come in and give you a penalty for that. You've also got the risk to the business for compliance records as well. So it may affect things like authorizations or guarantees. So again, make sure you do them on time. That's all I can advise at the moment.
Doing things on time is always good advice in any circumstance. Yeah, good response. Thanks, Vicky. Just going to close that poll now. Share the results. So 20% of you do feel as though you have clear terms with your broker. 20% if you don't. 60% of you are not sure. Vicky, any comments on that? I know we were talking earlier about direct and indirect representation. How does that interplay with this?
Yeah, so this is basically wording out the actual direct and indirect representation rules with HMRC. So you need to understand if you've got a contract apologies, they're drilling next door. They've just started. Apologies for the background noise. So if you've
That's
got a
right.
contract with an intermediary, make sure you've got that, or you've had that discussion with them. And again, it goes back to that earlier question we had about UPS. If you're not sure what they're doing on your behalf or what they should be doing on your behalf, have that discussion with them and make sure it's in your contract. Because if there are any issues and they're declaring things incorrectly, it's in your name at the end of the day. So make sure you've got that in place with them. And again, I'd recommend that you look at the direct and indirect representation regulations on HMRC website.
If in doubt, gov.uk is probably the thing we often will say to people. So yes, now we're onto your questions. If we move to the next slide, I think it's just going to say questions. But yeah, please do ask away. And we've got a couple in already. So this is a question in from Sarah, who has asked, how do I know what shipments have been sent if using entry in Declarants Record, EIDR?
Okay, so again, it goes back to your maintaining your records. At the end of the day, you should know, if you're using EIDR, then you'll know what, or you should know, hopefully know what purchase orders have been raised. You can obviously involve your import team, any stock records, the booking in and out system, check with your warehouses, what have they booked in? And again, that will link to your stock records as well. Any transport records, again, maintain your records, use MSS data, keep that communication with these suppliers and the transport teams as well. And it's all down to keeping records. Again, when people start doing the supplementary declarations, if you're using the MSS report, you'll be able to capture then if people are using your details in error. So there might be other businesses that are doing it wrong. So it's just, again, making sure you know what you're expecting, what you've received, and if it matches up.
Thanks, Vicky. And a question in from Christian, who's asked, what do we do if we find discrepancies between expected and receipted goods?
Okay, so again, if you find those discrepancies, that's good because you've got that process in place to do so. But you need to make sure you're declaring correctly. So if you find that you've received 20 more pieces than you've declared, then you need to make that declaration to HMRC using the forms earlier in the pack. And again, correct it if required, but do it as soon as possible and make sure you put in place processes to either capture it before it happens next time or to make sure you've got that remedial action in place.
Thank you, and thank you for the questions, everyone. Really good to see so many coming through. One just in from Sian or Sean. Sorry if I said that completely wrong. They ask, if we have received a customs and excise monthly VAT certificate, does that mean that the declaration has been made via the intermediary?
I wouldn't rely just on the VAT certificate because that's only telling you your VAT aspect. How do you know how much duty has been paid? So again, you'll have I'm assuming it's your C79 that you're referring to then. So that ought to be telling you your VAT, what you've paid, what you're reclaiming, but you don't actually know if the declaration's been made correctly in your name, under the correct customs procedure code, the correct commodity code, the correct duty rate, etc., etc. So I wouldn't rely on that. I'd again use the MSS reports and actually use the customs entries from your broker.
Thank you. That's been useful. Another question in from Cass was asking about. It's actually a broad question. It's asking about Incoterms in general. So we heard about DAP earlier. Cass was asking about whether kind of using FCA, who would be completing the declaration there, and she asked if you could talk about what the most used Incoterms would be in the current post-Brexit scenario and what the implications would be.
Yeah, it's a bit of a wide question, if I'm honest, but yeah, I think it's become a shock to a lot of businesses in the EU and the UK on what terms are actually in place. I know from previous experience working for a car manufacturer, there was a lot of suppliers set up on DDP terms, either UK to EU or vice versa, and it became a shock because they couldn't do the import declaration in their own country. So again, if you've not done so, I'd review all your Incoterms that you've got set up with your purchasing teams and make sure it's suitable for your business. So again, we've got a course on Incoterms, but it goes from one extreme to the other. So X Works or DDP. So you're either responsible for everything or nothing. And then you've got several in between that. So anything that isn't, if goods are coming from the EU to the UK and it's not on DDP terms, you'll be expected to do a declaration in a simple way.
A nice 30-second whistle-stop tour of Incoterms. Yeah, as mentioned, we do have a whole training course on it, so I hope that's been a useful summary at the very least. I think we're starting to run dry on questions, so thank you everyone for the ones you've put in so far. So I think we're probably going to start wrapping up. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Oh, one after that, I think. So yeah, thank you once again to Vicky and also to Rob and the team at Welsh Automotive Forum for having us. I hope everyone has found this useful. On this slide, we are providing a new Brexit support package of bespoke training for businesses, which is completely fundable by government grants worth up to £2,000. The package includes training and advisory services that can be delivered in-house and the creation of a bespoke action plan for your business to adjust to new rules and processes resulting from Brexit. For more information about this package and for all of our training, our qualifications, our membership offerings, please do visit export.org.uk. But before I close off the webinar, I just wanted to check, Rob, any final remarks, any last words from yourself?
Well, many thanks, Vicky and yourself, Will, for preparing today's event and hosting and actually executing and delivering a very, I thought, a very extremely beneficial and relevant webinar. I think, lots to consider clearly ahead of this fast approaching deadline for companies who have delayed declarations. And I found the polls also very fascinating and interesting to gauge the level of understanding and preparation. So yeah, a very good session, and I'd also like to thank and take the opportunity, I should say, to thank all attendees for tuning in for today's session, and sincerely hope that your organizations, potentially your freight organization partners and customs brokers are fully prepared now ahead of this looming deadline. As you've alluded to at the start, slides and a recording will be made available certainly after the event. But in the meantime, take care and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks everyone for listening in, and hopefully speak to you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.